Today's tutorial is going to be my illustrated macrame owl. Macrame owls have been popular since the 1970s. To do this tutorial you need to measure 8 lengths of cord that are 8 feet 4 or 254 centimetres or 100 inches long. You're going to need a wooden dowel and you're going to need some space to do your work. There are only 3 knots in this tutorial. That's a lark's head knot, which you are seeing here, which is the cords folded in half and then tied over and through each other to put them onto the dowel. We're also going to be tying diagonal double half hitches and we're going to be tying square knots. So to start with, you just need to hang your 8 cord lengths by folding them in half and placing them over the dowel. For the first row, I miss the first pair of cords that are left hanging and tie a diagonal set of double half hitches by splitting the second set in half. I'm doing it on the left hand side here, and then I repeat my action on the right hand side. So there are just 4 double diagonal half hitches to make a little line that goes out from the left and the right. Then with the other half of the cord that I didn't use, I'm working from either side into the middle doing diagonal double half hitches. Once I get to the middle of this, I stop and switch over to the other side, which you'll see in a moment. It's also important that when I tie the other side, when I reach the middle, I don't continue with either one or the other. I put a single hitch in or a half hitch in so that the lines don't continue or cross over, they simply meet in the middle. This is also how I do it on the next row down, which you'll see in a moment. So for the second row, row 2, I put a single twist in the middle and then I work from the middle of that point out to the left, tying the double diagonal half hitches and including the last cord. Then I work my way back from that single twist that I put in to the middle section of the owl. We're trying to make an M shape here that is doubled over. Once I make it to the middle, I stop and I repeat the process again on the other side of the hanging. For this pattern, it is symmetrical on both sides, so any action that I take, I simply just repeat by mirroring my actions for the other side of the owl. You can see here that I'm tying the last of my diagonal double half hitches to the middle. Once I get to the middle, I only put in a half hitch, so a singular one, which I'm tying right now. After that, we're going to move on to tie the owl's eyes. So I leave a cord hanging on one side and simply tie a square knot using 4 cords to put his eyeball feature into the middle, just underneath the peak of the M. Then I'm going to move over to the middle, splitting the cords and tie in diagonal double half hitches across 2 cords to the left, not including any of the cords that have been tied in the square knot, and then 2 cords to the right. For the next row down, I'm going to put a single twist in and then tie hitches left and right again, only within the cords that have been placed above. And for the next row underneath this, I just put a single hitch in. There we go. Now to seal that diamond off, I'm taking the cords that are left over from the edge, pulling them over to the right hand side, and taking them down to the middle, and then repeating my actions again, mirroring them on the other side. Once I get to the very centre, I put a single half hitch in to secure. So underneath the eyes, the next process that I'm going to do is to put some more hitches in, using that leftover cord that we had from the row before. I'm just tying a few underneath here. I don't work my way all the way across. I'm just including all of the cords that are left over from the square knot above. And then I simply take the edge cord for the next row along. And this time I am going to tie my diagonal hitches all the way along, leaving a little bit of space underneath his beak or the diamond that we just tied above. Making sure that he sits flush against the table, so ultimately he can sit flush against any wall that you hang him on. Once I make to the middle, I simply stop And then taking the same actions on the other side, that's using the very edge cord, tying loosely my diagonal hitches so that there's space between the square knot and the line that I'm creating with my diagonal double hitch line. I don't work my way all the way across this row, just include the cords that are hanging from that square knot, and then underneath I take the furthest right hand cord again and tie my diagonal double half hitches all the way along, including all the cords that are hanging from the row above, and then I continue across, leaving a little bit of space between the line of knots that I'm creating and the beak until I get to the centre and the other cords that I tie on the other side. Once again for this, I'm just tying a single hitch over to join them in the middle. Next, I'm going to be describing the owl's body. For this process, I'm going to be using alternating square knots. So I take the very middle 4 cords and tie a single square knot. Then, using 2 cords from that knot I've just tied and 2 cords that are left over to the left, I tie a single square knot there. On the right hand side I do the same, so that we're starting to form a triangular pattern with each row of square knots being part of the knot rows before and an additional set of cords added in. I like to work the edges first and then fill in the square knot space in the middle. And for the last knots on the edge, this is quite important that these are quite tight and straight, so you can see me making adjustments here by pulling the middle cords in between the knots. It's always good to go back and adjust your pattern if you're not happy with it. Square knots are quite nice because you can pull the middle sections to tighten things up above. And then here I'm creating a W shape almost in a moment. So once I've flattened out the triangle by filling in the rest of the square knots, I'm then just going to add 2 extra square knots below, leaving 2 cords on that one side out, and then repeating the action on the other side, so leaving 2 cords on the right and tying a square knot here. This will become apparent for the reason why in a moment. So next I'm creating a W shape using diagonal hitches. I'm running from right to left to the middle of that extra square knot that I've left. And then I repeat the same process on the other side, mirroring my action, so working from right to left, tying diagonal double hitches just to the middle of that extra square knot that I've tied there. And then, heading straight back into the middle, I put a single twist in or a single half hitch, and I work left to right all the way down to that other set of diagonal hitches that I've tied. This creates a row that is like a capital W shape, which is part of why the pattern is so attractive, because it reflects the M shape that we made at the top to describe the owl's head. Finishing off with a single hitch. Once again, for symmetry and attractiveness of this pattern, I am repeating the same process as above to make an additional row so that there are 2 lines in the capital W shape, just because I think this looks better. We're ultimately describing the owl's feet. In the middle, I do a single hitch instead of a double, and then work my way left to right and right to left. Stopping at the centre and putting a single double hitch in instead. Now for the feet, I'm tying a square knot, but I'm using the outside cords to tie the square knot around all of the hanging cords left over. This is so that when I cut the bottom, they look like birds' feet and that they are secure. Taking my Fiskars scissors, I cut a bit lower than what I think I need, because it's always better to measure twice and cut once. Now for the owl's arms, I'm taking some extra lengths here. These lengths were 11 or 35 inches across. Those lengths were measured and then cut, and then I folded them in half and attached them, so each side is 6 lark's heads of those lengths tied in half. And then to describe the wings, I'm simply going to use my imagination and tie hitches from the top cord all the way down. If you are working vertically, I suggest you take your time over this so that your wings don't flop around when the owl is up against the wall. Once I get to the bottom of the first row, I just leave the cord hanging. For the subsequent rows, I'm going to leave 2, maybe 3 cords to describe a curved shape of the owl's wing instead of just it being repeated lines. So the first row I leave to the bottom. For this row, I'm going to be leaving cords. I'm not going to be tying all the way down. I'm going to repeat this process on the right hand side again in a moment and then show you how I cut the leftover hanging cords to describe the owl's wing, leaving 2 cords at the bottom. So here I am cutting the cords. I cut the shorter cords that are left over at the bottom straight, and then I pull the longer cords down and unravel them so that they give a wavy fringe effect. This always happens when you use 3-ply cords, and I think it's extra effective for this owl pattern to describe his feathers instead. So there you have it, your first ever DIY macrame owl. I call this pattern Arnold. Hope you enjoyed this process.